The jar on my grandmother's windowsill never had a label. It did not need one. Inside it were brown paper packets, folded by hand, each one tied with a bit of string, and each one holding next year's garden. Tomato seeds from the plant that survived the hailstorm of 1962. Bean seeds from the vine that climbed highest on the fence. Cabbage seeds from the head that never once got eaten by slugs. My grandmother never bought a seed packet in her life. Not one. And her garden fed 8 people every single summer. Right now, somewhere in your town, there is a store selling tiny paper packets of seeds for $4, $5, sometimes more. A packet that might hold 20 tomato seeds. You plant them, you grow your tomatoes, you eat them, and then next spring you walk back into that same store and you buy the same packet again. Most families who keep a vegetable garden spend somewhere between $60 and $150 a year just on seeds. Year after year. Forever. For something that grows wild out of the very plants already standing in your garden. My name is Martin Hofer. I grew up on a small farm in the foothills south of Munich in Bavaria. And what I am going to show you today is something my grandmother Rosina did every single autumn of her life without ever thinking of it as special. She thought of it the way you think of breathing. But it is the reason her garden never depended on a store, never depended on a season's prices, never depended on anyone but her own hands and her own patience. I want to show you exactly what she did, in the order she did it, and I want to tell you why almost nobody does this anymore, even though the seeds in your own garden right now are sitting there waiting to be saved for free. Stay with me. Let me start with the thing most people get backwards, because if you do not understand this, the rest will not make sense. A vegetable plant is not just food. It is also a seed factory, and it has been running that factory for free the whole time you were watering it. Every tomato that gets too ripe and starts to soften on the vine, every bean pod you left too long and it went dry and rattly, every head of lettuce that bolted up tall with little yellow flowers on top, that plant was not failing you. It was finishing its real job, producing the next generation. We just usually pull it out before it gets the chance. My grandmother never pulled it out. She watched the garden all summer with 2 sets of eyes. One eye for what she was going to eat that week, the other eye for what she was going to save for next year. And every single plant she touched, she was already thinking about its children. Here is the part that surprised me most as a boy, and it still surprises people today. You do not need anything from a store to do this. No machine, no chemical, no special container. You need the plant itself, a dry day, a paper bag, and a windowsill. That is the whole list. My grandmother kept a tin box of brown paper and string in the kitchen drawer her whole life, and that tin box was worth more to our family than anything in the bank. Let me walk you through how she did it, plant by plant, because each one has its own small trick, and once you know the tricks, you will never look at your garden the same way again. Tomatoes first, because tomatoes are where most people start and they are the most forgiving. You pick the best tomato on the healthiest plant, not the prettiest one for the table. The one that grew strongest, ripened earliest, never got sick. You let that one sit on the counter a few extra days past ripe until it is almost too soft to eat. Then you cut it open and you scoop the seeds and the gel around them into a small jar with a little water. You leave that jar sitting on the windowsill for 2 or 3 days, and something happens that looks a little strange the first time you see it. A thin layer of mold forms on top. My grandmother was never afraid of that mold. She said it was doing the same job that happens naturally on the ground when a tomato falls and rots, breaking down the gel coating around each seed that would otherwise stop it from sprouting. After those few days, you pour off the moldy water, rinse the seeds in a strainer, and spread them on a plate to dry for about a week, stirring them once a day so they do not clump. Once they are fully dry, hard, not tacky at all, you fold them into a paper packet and write the date on it. Those seeds will keep for years in a cool, dry drawer. Beans and peas are even simpler, and this is where most beginners should really start because there is almost no way to do it wrong. You leave the pods on the vine long past the point where you would normally pick them for eating. You let them go brown, dry, and papery until they rattle when you shake them. Then you pick the whole pod, crack it open, and the beans inside are already finished, already ready to plant next spring. No fermenting, no soaking, nothing. Just dry pods, a paper bag, and patience. My grandmother kept her bean seed in old flour sacks hung from a nail in the attic, away from the mice, and every spring she would shake one sack out onto the kitchen table, and the whole family would sit around it picking out the best, fullest beans to plant first. Peppers work almost the same way. You let one pepper on the plant go fully ripe, past the color you would eat it at, until it starts to wrinkle slightly. A green pepper has to go red, a red one has to go almost soft. You cut it open, scrape the seeds onto a plate, and let them dry for about a week before storing them. She always said a pepper seed saved too early was a seed saved for nothing, because it had not finished growing yet, no matter how the fruit looked on the outside. Lettuce and other leafy greens are the ones that confuse people, because by the time the plant is making seeds, it does not look like food anymore. It shoots up a tall stalk, the leaves turn bitter, and small yellow flowers appear at the top. Most gardeners pull this plant out in frustration, thinking it has gone bad. My grandmother called this plant the gift. She let it stand there, ugly and tall, while the flowers dried into little fluffy seed heads, almost like a dandelion. She would hold a paper bag underneath, shake the stalk gently, and hundreds of tiny seeds would fall into the bag. One single lettuce plant left to do this can give you enough seed for many years of salads. The same is true of spinach, arugula, and most of the greens you grow in a spring bed. Let one plant in the row go to seed every year, and you will never run out. Squash and pumpkins are a little different, because the seeds need to fully mature inside a fruit that has gone past the eating stage too. A zucchini you would normally pick small and tender, if you leave it on the vine until it grows huge and the skin turns hard and dull, almost like a gourd. The seeds inside finish developing fully. You scoop them out, rinse off the pulp in a bowl of water, the good seeds sink and the empty ones float, and you dry them well on a screen or an old window mesh, turning them now and then so they do not stick to whatever they are drying on. They take longer to dry than tomato seed, sometimes 2 full weeks because they are bigger and hold more moisture inside. Carrots, onions, and cabbage are the patient gardener's seeds, because those plants do not flower and set seed in their first year at all. You have to leave the root in the ground, or dig it up and replant it the following spring, and let it grow a second season before it sends up the tall flowering stalk that finally makes seed. My grandmother kept a small corner of the garden just for this, a handful of carrots and onions left in the ground every single autumn, marked with a stick so nobody would dig them up by mistake for the soup pot. It takes patience, but once you have done it once, you understand why the old families always had a corner of the garden that looked a little wild and a little forgotten. That corner was the future. Now, here is the part my grandmother was strict about, and it is the part most people skip. And it is the reason this method works generation after generation instead of failing after a year or two. You only save seed from the plant that did well. Not the average plant, the best one, the one that fought off the early frost, the one the beetles left alone, the one that kept producing when the summer got dry. Every year you do this, you are quietly teaching your garden to survive your exact patch of land, your exact weather, your exact soil. A seed packet from the store was grown somewhere far away, by a company for a market, not for your hillside or your backyard. But a seed saved from your own strongest plant already knows how to live where you live. That is not a poetic idea. That is exactly how my grandmother's tomatoes got earlier and sturdier every single year, decade after decade, without her doing anything except saving from the best one each autumn. There is one warning I have to give you honestly, because I will not pretend this works on everything. Some of the vegetables sold in stores today are what they call hybrids, bred by crossing 2 different parent plants. If you save seed from a hybrid, the plant that grows next year will often be strange, weaker, or completely different from the parent. The package will not always tell you this in plain words, so you have to look closely. You want to look for seed packets or plants marked heirloom or open-pollinated when you start. Those are the kind my grandmother always grew, the kind passed down through real families for real generations, and those are the ones that breed true, season after season, exactly the way you expect. If you already have a garden growing this summer and you are not sure what kind your plants are, the safest way to find out is to simply try saving a small batch and see what comes up next spring. Worst case, you have learned something for nothing. Best case, you have just started your own family's seed line. Storage is the last piece, and it is the simplest. My grandmother kept her seed packets in a tin box in the cool dark of the pantry, never in a damp place, never in a hot place, because heat and moisture are the two things that put a seed to sleep for good before its time. Some families I know in the village use old glass jars with a few spoonfuls of dry rice at the bottom to soak up any stray moisture. Done properly, most vegetable seeds will keep for 3, 4, even 5 years and still sprout strong, and some, like onion seed, are best used up within a year or two while they are still at their freshest. A handful of beans saved this autumn could still be feeding your family 5 summers from now for the price of nothing. I want you to think about what this actually means in real terms. If a family spends $100 a year on seeds, over 20 years that is $2,000 spent buying something that was growing in their own garden the entire time, for free, every single season. My grandmother's tin box of paper packets, built up slowly over her lifetime, was worth more than any savings account, because no bank failure, no store closing, no bad harvest at some seed company 3 countries away could ever touch it. The seeds were hers. The knowledge was hers. Nobody could take it from her, and nobody could charge her for it again. This is not a poor person's trick. I want to be honest about that, because some people hear this and think it sounds like something you only do if you cannot afford the store. It is the opposite. Every serious gardener in my village, rich or poor, saved seed because it was simply the intelligent thing to do. The store-bought packet was for people in a hurry, people just passing through their garden instead of really living in it. The families who stayed, who farmed the same land for generations, they never once depended on a packet from a shop. They depended on their own best plant from last summer. That is the whole secret, and it was never hidden. It was simply forgotten, the same way most kitchen gardens got smaller and most families got busier, and the habit quietly disappeared between one generation and the next. So here's what I want you to do this week. Walk out to your own garden and look at it with my grandmother's eyes. Find your strongest tomato plant and leave one fruit on it to go soft. Find your healthiest bean vine and let a few pods go dry and brown instead of picking them for the table. If you have lettuce bolting up tall and bitter, do not pull it out. Let it flower. Let it finish its real work. By the end of this season, you could have your very first envelope of seeds that cost you nothing but a little patience. And next spring, you will plant your own garden's children instead of walking back into a store. Tell me in the comments which vegetable you are going to try saving first. I read every single one, and I want to hear where you live and what grows well for you, because every garden teaches its own lessons. Next time, I am going to show you what my grandmother kept in the root cellar my grandfather built behind our house in 1951. The simple way she stored a whole winter of vegetables with no refrigerator at all, using nothing but sand, straw, and the cool of the earth itself. Until then, save one seed, plant one memory, and remember, the people who built this country with their hands knew things we are only just starting to remember.